Welcome, everybody. The people decided. Biden-Harris ticket won, yes. And here are two more good pieces of news. 91% of Black women voters voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. They continue to be the Democratic Party's most powerful voting group. And Arizona power, this is the second one, Arizona power must come from 100% carbon-free sources by 2050. Yay, go Arizona. Oh, and how about a Black, South Asian, Jamaican immigrant woman in the White House? History has been made and you were a part of it. I hope you realize that. And don't we love that Georgia is still in play with 2 Senate seats still to be had? You know, I lived in Georgia for 20 years. I love Georgia. I love Stacey Abrams and all the grassroots organizers who've been tirelessly on the ground in Georgia, registering voters and protecting voter rights and confident that history could be made in their state. That's what it takes, folks, you know? Year after year, day after day, tireless, strategic organizing until you win. It's what Rebecca Solnit said last Friday. Change may look sudden, like mushrooms suddenly sprouting out of the ground, but it's the unseen, ongoing, underground network of fungi doing the work, and the sudden mushrooms are the manifestation of all that work. The results of this election, Biden-Harris, the mushrooms, bloomed in large part because of the organizing that was done primarily by independent grassroots nonprofits and their volunteers like you. So think of yourselves as fungi, doing the unseen work that can make it all happen. I so love and I'm so grateful to all of you, our Fire Drill Friday climate volunteers who managed to contact more than, dig this, 4.4 million climate voters in swing states. Nearly 300,000 of them were Latinx voters, more than double our original target. And in the last 2 weeks before Election Day, Greenpeace and Fire Drill Friday volunteers reached 1.8 million voters, asking them to get out the vote. I hope that you all realize what a difference you made. And at some point when COVID is gone or majorly subdued, we won't be unseen anymore. We'll be back in the streets of the nation's capital, stirring up good change-making trouble, right? And in the meantime, even though we can't be together in person, there's so many ways that we can still have an impact, which is what we're going to talk about today. You know, let's remember that Biden ran on the boldest climate platform of any presidential candidate. He ran on 100% clean energy by 2035. He ran on historic investments, $2 trillion to build a clean energy economy and create millions of good jobs. He ran on a commitment to justice, prioritizing communities who've been hit first and worst by this crisis. He will be our first climate president. But we have our jobs cut out for us because we face an immediate climate emergency and we've lost the last 4 years to inaction. As we keep saying, this is no time for moderation, right? We need bold, brave systems change. And there'll be plenty of pressure on the new administration from Republicans and Democrats alike to slow down and compromise. But the planet cannot compromise. Science doesn't compromise. Between now and Inauguration Day, we have to put as much pressure on Biden to use the full force, full power of the presidency in his first 10 days to combat the climate crisis. If we don't win those Senate seats, it's going to be virtually impossible to pass climate legislation. And even if we do win them, it's going to be hard because there's strong forces against us, which is why we need to focus on the things the new administration can do right away by executive action to keep fossil fuels in the ground and build a just transition. We also face the COVID pandemic, right? And the Biden-Harris administration is going to have to immediately address that as well. But the good news is, in so many ways, COVID pandemic and the economic crisis that it exacerbated can be solved as part of addressing the climate emergency. And we're going to talk about that and how to most strategically push the Biden administration in the days ahead with three people who deeply understand these issues. Kassie Siegel is the director of the Climate Law Institute at the Center for Biological Diversity. Her litigation led the way to Endangered Species Act protection for the polar bear, and she's a leader in the fight to ban fracking and keep fossil fuels in the ground. Leonard is the executive director of Greenpeace USA, an independent environmental organization which uses research, creative communication, nonviolent direct action, and people power to advance environmental solutions. Prior to this role, Annie created The Story of Stuff, a hit 20-minute web film and book that takes viewers on an eye-opening tour of the often hidden environmental and social costs of our consumer-driven culture. The Story of Stuff film, how about this, has generated over 40 million views in more than 200 countries and territories since its launch, making it one of the most watched online environmental themed films to date, and sparking a much needed conversation about patterns of consumption today. Annie is currently partnering with me on Fire Drill Fridays to inspire more people to join climate activism. And Jiang is a climate campaigner fighting for a Green New Deal that brings justice to communities and workers most impacted by the climate crisis and fossil fuel extraction. He has a background in clean energy engineering and organizing with youth climate movements. From Chicago, Charlie's currently based on unceded Piscataway land in Washington, D.C. Welcome to all of you. I'm so excited we're all together. And first of all, how are you feeling? That's a question.
I am feeling so good. I'm feeling so good because the people spoke. It was the highest turnout in a century. Biden got more votes than any president ever. I mean, that is so exciting to see our democracy work. And is he perfect? No. Is he movable? Yes. And the climate movement is moving him. So I'm just feeling totally great. And Kassie and Charlie and Jane, you all have been such a huge part of it. So it's awesome to be here on this auspicious day.
Can you believe how many people turned out in spite of the COVID pandemic? I mean, democracy worked, right?
Democracy works when we use it.
Yeah, when we used it. You know, I remember, Annie, the last time we were so excited to oust an anti-environmental president and usher in change. That was Obama in 2008. But we didn't see the change that we'd hoped. What did we learn from that experience, and how has the conversation and context around climate changed between 2008 and right now, after this election in 2020? That's for you.
That is a conversation that so many people are digging into. What did we learn so that we can do better then? Because I remember that too. When Obama won, there was dancing in the streets. There was champagne popping. We were so thrilled. It was also, just like this duo, a historic breakthrough in terms of our first Black president. We were so excited, and things didn't work out the way that we wanted. And there's a few different reasons, or a few different lessons. There's three top lessons. The first lesson that we need to hold true this time is don't stop. Too many of us thought that once Obama won, we won, we're done. As Van Jones told me once, we went from being a movement to a movie. We sort of were working so hard to help him win. And then we sort of kicked back and said, oh, what's gonna happen? What's he gonna do? And we got too passive. And Obama, in his campaign to win, was the first president really who built one of these giant distributed networks, the way that you were just talking about how Fire Drill Friday volunteers have been calling people. Obama was the one to really pioneer that. When he came into office, he had this massive people power operation, and he put it on pause, and we let him. That was an enormous, enormous mistake. There have been some jokes going around that if Biden wins, we can all go back to brunch. There is no going back to brunch unless that is a working brunch where you are texting and calling voters in Georgia, making your plans to hold Biden accountable. But that's lesson number one, is don't stop. And lesson number two from thinking back from the Obama years is not to get intoxicated by access. And what I mean by that,
what?
By access. Access to people.
Access.
The discussion around climate is going to shift now and start to use words that we use. It's going to sound like we have influence because it's going to seem like us in there because they use similar words. They believe in science. They believe in justice, a lot of the things we believe in. And that was a mistake we made when Obama came in. When Obama came in, he started inviting us all to review policies and give talks in the White House. And we got so intoxicated by this access that some of us confused it for influence. Access is only meaningful if you can turn it into influence. So don't get intoxicated by the conversation, by the invitations, by the openness. We have to have real solid action, not just words. And then my third lesson is another variation on don't stop, is don't be shy about pushing them. I think a lot of us felt bad about pushing Obama because we were so excited he was there and we had worked so hard. And the same thing now, we all worked so hard to get Biden Harris in there. So it might feel uncomfortable to now push them, but actually that gives us more right to push them. We help them get this job. They work for us, literally, they work for us. And if you have somebody who works for you who's not doing your job, you clarify expectations and tell them to deliver. And that's what we need to do, is that we need to really push them to act. And if there's one thing this campaign taught us, is that he's movable. So we have to move him. Luckily, it's a totally different context than with Obama. We're smarter. The movement is smarter because we got fooled before. We know not to do that again. Climate change is much more dire. The science is more dire. The reality of it, the imminence in people's lives, the floods, the droughts, the fires, it's more immediate and tangible. And the public discourse has totally shifted. A majority of people support strong action on climate. People know fossil fuels have got to go. The context is different. The science is different. We are different. And this time we're not going to let them off the hook.
And the uprising of the student climate movements around the world. I mean, that was really a game changer and continues to be, right? That didn't exist back during the Obama years.
It didn't exist. It didn't exist. The movement has grown, it has diversified, it has built more connections with immigrant rights groups, women's groups, Black Lives Matter group. We are more united, we are more systemic, we're more strong. We are out of patience and we are almost out of time. This is it. That was a dress rehearsal in 2008. This is the real deal. We are going to force Biden to be the climate leader that the world needs right now.
So how do we maintain momentum for the fight for climate? We're all so exhausted. How do we maintain the fight?
I am tired. I don't think I've ever been so tired and so excited at the same time before. Well, I think different things for different people in terms of what motivates them. For me, what motivates me is the science. I really like to read about the science and know how dire the situation is. The community, I mean, look who I get to work with, all of you. You all motivate me. The people who join you, look at the chat of who's here. The community inspires me. And also the vision about how good it can be. What I actually do, this may sound corny, but I just suggest you try it. It's so awesome. When I wake up every morning, I spend just 30 seconds or a minute just imagining, holding the vision of what the world could be like. Because in our country, we have so many resources. We have so many smart people. We have every single thing we need. We could have a country that is sustainable, that is climate resilient, that is socially and racially and economically just. Like, there's no reason we cannot have this. So I actually do a little meditation every morning, just close my eyes, think of that vision. And for me, the vision really motivates me because I know it is possible. If it wasn't possible, I would get demoralized, but it's possible and it's within reach more than ever before.
And it's so beautiful.
It's important to remember that our main vehicle for making changes are us, our bodies, right? So we also have to take care of ourselves, get enough rest, eat well, spend time in nature if that does it for you, spend time with loved ones, do art and music, whatever it takes to keep you going because the work is in just starting.
Thanks. Hey, Charlie, how are addressing COVID-19, the economic crisis, racial injustice, and the climate emergency, how are they connected?
Well, Jane, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. To all the Fire Joe Friday viewers out there, like, thank you for everything you did in this election to contact millions of voters to make all the difference, and at the same time to keep building a stronger movement, stronger activists, stronger organizing to do exactly what Annie said, to keep going, to keep showing the power that we have and showing that we can build a society that works for all of us. And that's really what this is about. These, a record number of people turned out in this election to elect a candidate who had a plan to build back better from all four of these crises that you just named. And they're absolutely connected. We can't separate them. They're impacting the same communities, the same Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, low-income communities, the same ones that live under the shadow of refineries and petrochemical facilities. They're the same ones that have been hit hardest by the COVID crisis and hit hardest by the massive employment that's happened in these last 6 months. And at the same time, the solutions to these crises, like Green New Deal, could put millions of people back to work, not just, building back from this recession, but also allowing us to move forward into a future beyond the racist, policies and actions of fossil fuel CEOs and their cronies, and we have to remember who elected Joe Biden, right? It was Black voters, Indigenous, Latinx voters, it was young people, it was climate voters. These are the same communities from the Navajo Nation, from the Gulf South, from Detroit and Philadelphia. They're the same ones that are getting hit hardest by these crises that we face. And they're the ones that made all the difference in getting Joe Biden and Democrats into office. So I hope they remember that, and we will make sure they remember that. We want to see bold action, right? And we want to see a future where we don't just build back better, but also build forward so we can all thrive.
What's Biden's mandate? What do voters want?
Well, voters elected a candidate who had real plans to address these crises, to address the pandemic and unemployment, the climate crisis, of course, and racial injustice. When it comes to climate, as you said, Jane, this is the most ambitious climate plan of any major party presidential nominee in history. Running on 100% clean power by 2035, centering environmental justice throughout his plans, pledging to take on the fossil fuel industry by ending fossil fuel subsidies and leases and other giveaways. So voters chose that. Voters chose a candidate who pledged to make good on these promises, and now it's up to all of us to hold them accountable to that. They also chose a government that actually cares for people. One that will help ensure that we all have what we need to thrive. They chose clean air and clean water, good jobs, good schools and nutrition, housing and healthcare. That's what voters came out to the polls in such record numbers this November to choose. And they also chose accountability, right? They chose transparency and integrity. They wanted a government that actually serves the people, all of us, not fossil fuel CEOs, not corporate polluters and Wall Street shareholders. So that's one of the first things that is actually going to be coming up. Biden right now with this transition team is choosing who's going to be in his White House, who's going to be in his cabinet, who's going to staff the thousands of positions across the administration to get his plans done. And it's up to us to make sure that those are real advocates for the people. Those are champions for climate action, for climate justice, and not fossil fuel leaders, not fossil fuel CEOs and lobbyists. Not when the fossil fuel industry has delayed action, denied these crises, polluted our communities for decades, right? We don't need their people in the White House. We need people like us, people who have been in the trenches for years, fighting for a better future for everyone.
And if we can do that, if he follows through and does that, I'm of the belief that some of those 70,000 that voted for Trump can be peeled away. If they see that government really can work for them, they'll come around. That's what I think. So let me ask you this. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has warned that if the Biden administration doesn't put progressives in top positions, the party would lose big in the 2022 midterm elections. What is your sense? Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I have to say, watching the representative and you talk a couple of Fridays ago was one of the joys heading up to the election. So thank you both for that amazing time. And for all of you watching, please go watch Representative Ocasio-Cortez and her wise words. You know, I think if you look again at what made the difference in this election, what got Joe Biden into office, what kept a Democratic House, and what, you know, might, depending on what happens in Georgia, actually flip the Senate back to Democrats. It's a big, broad coalition. It's a coalition that had record turnout. And again, it's Black voters, it's Indigenous, Brown, young people, climate voters that made all the difference, especially in these key states and districts like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. Mm-hmm. So I read from that there's absolutely a mandate for progressive action, for an administration and Congress that will actually do what it takes to put people back to work, to build back, not just from the COVID public health crisis, but also from the public health crisis we've been facing for decades with the pollution of the fossil fuel industry, with environmental racism and environmental injustice across so many communities. So that's what I think people voted for. And that's the kind of action I think we're going to need from this administration, from this next Congress, is to actually work for the people, to not hold back and to move forward to build something better for all of us.
Yeah. How did the results, this is for you again, Charlie, how did the results of the election make the case for more progressive climate champs in key roles?
Yeah, absolutely. In the same kind of way, you know, the next question that's facing us is who is going to be in Biden's circle, who is going to actually lead the Environmental Protection Agency, you know, the Department of Energy, be in the White House and be implementing these policies that Biden and Democrats have promised us, you know, in this election. So, you know, they must absolutely be the folks with what it takes to work for the people. So we need climate scientists, right? We need grassroots activists and environmental justice leaders. We need climate champions who have been in the trenches fighting for a better future for all of us for so long. You know, we don't need fossil fuel lobbyists or executives or people who served on the board of fossil fuel companies, coal and gas companies. You know, these are folks who've represented companies that have polluted our water and our air for over a century, and who have spent millions and billions of dollars really delaying, you know, any action to address the climate crisis, denying that it even exists. You know, we cannot trust these people to be in government. We need, you know, real leaders that'll serve the people in Biden's circle.
You know, when I was looking at all the department heads, the cabinet appointees that he's going to make, I mean, most of them relate to the climate crisis. They all have something to do with solving the climate crisis, especially agriculture. So I started thinking about the importance of the Secretary of Agriculture. This is to all of you. What kind of person would you see as being perfect as the Secretary of Agriculture?
Well, I'd want someone who knows what it takes to be a small farmer, right? To be a family farmer, to be someone who is actually trying right now to figure out what it means to be a sustainable farmer, to be regenerative, to change practices. And so someone with the scientific expertise, someone with the ability, you know, the experience in government or in sort of the big operation that it takes to run a whole agency, and someone who's actually going to be accountable and knows what it takes to be part of the community, right? To be part of the movement and community who are fighting for a better future, you know, who are fighting for a stable climate, and who are fighting for good jobs, you know, especially for a farming industry that has been struggling. You know, we need that experience in the White House, and in the, you know, in USDA in particular.
Could be so important. Oh my God. So Kassie, we need Biden to be a climate president. What does that mean?
Thank you, Jane. And being a climate president means that Biden takes action the minute he steps in the Oval Office, and he can't wait because the climate emergency is just so dangerous. So Biden needs to listen to Jane and rip the fire extinguisher off the wall and start fighting this climate fire immediately. And he needs to end the fossil fuel era. And that's because oil, gas, and coal, the fossil fuels, are responsible for 3/4 of the climate problem. And Biden has promised to do it. And you might be thinking, okay, well, great, but how does he do it? And how can he do it without Congress? What if the Republicans still control the Senate? What if climate legislation doesn't pass for whatever reason, as we saw under President Obama? And the good news that I get to deliver is that Joe Biden will be the most powerful person on the planet when he steps in the White House. And that power comes from the laws that Congress has already passed. It comes from laws like the Clean Air Act that the Supreme Court has already ruled have to be used to address greenhouse pollution. And we have to demand that he uses every tool in the box to launch the just transition off of fossil fuels and to advance climate justice. And there is so many things that Biden can do to get us out of this mess that over 500 organizations actually have put together a plan. It's called the Climate President Action Plan, and including Fire Drill Fridays and my organization. And it's the top 10 steps that Biden needs to take in his first 10 days in office.
By executive order.
By executive order, actually without waiting for Congress,
Right.
because he can lead the way. And these are the things that he can do without new laws from Congress.
Tell us
And
what they are.
Yeah. So, number one, declare a climate emergency. And that is going to set the proper tone of urgency. And, the first thing to do to solve a problem is you got to acknowledge the problem. So let's call this emergency what it is. And in the plan, most of the things we're asking for can be done with Biden's regular powers. But a benefit of declaring a climate emergency is it does unlock some special powers, and Congress gave these to the president in the National Emergencies Act of 1976. Every president since then has used it. And one of the things Biden can do with those powers is redirect a portion of military spending to renewable energy construction. And this, we need clean energy. People want it. It's going to bring a ton of good jobs. And the economic recovery and climate action, of course, have to go together. So this is one of the things that Biden can do with the emergency powers. Every piece of the plan is grounded in justice. And so there's 10 steps. I won't rattle off all 10 of them right this minute, but it's at climatepresident.org. People can check it out. Please join us there. And of course, we all know environmental justice has to be central. And there's another plan. It's the Frontlines Climate Justice Platform. We'll put the link to that in the chat also, with lots more detail on the environmental justice pieces.
Is stopping subsidies to the fossil fuel industry part of those 10 steps?
It is. So changing financial flows in part to stop the subsidies, absolutely part of the plan. And people may think, oh, subsidies, that's a spending thing, that's only for Congress. And sure, of course, a lot of it is for Congress too, but there's a lot the president can do. So for example, government loan guarantees to fossil fuel companies. I mean, these are effective subsidies. So there's a lot of things like that that the president can do that are in the plan. Another really big one is holding fossil fuel polluters accountable, because these companies knew for 50 years, they knew about the climate science, they knew the damage that their products caused, and they lied about it. And critically, they blocked solutions to their dirty products so they could sell more fossil fuels. And there's a lot the president can do also to hold polluters accountable.
Yeah, we've seen that problem here in California where they, these big oil companies close up shop and leave, and us California taxpayers are left, holding the tab. Not good. So let me ask you something. As I said at the beginning, President-elect Biden has pledged to spend some $2 trillion to develop the clean, renewable energy future. Do you think that he sees that as deficit spending, or does he imagine that, oh yeah, part of that will come from the defense funding that he would get when he declares a climate emergency? Part of the 2 trillion would come from the billions of dollars that we spend in subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. Where do you see him thinking the $2 trillion are going to come from?
Yeah, I think more than anything, Biden understands that the best thing we can do for our economy is to transition as quickly as possible to clean energy and address the climate crisis. And that's a really, really, really key point about this. There is nothing worse for our economy than to keep investing in the dangerous boom and bust fossil fuel economy and to keep subsidizing that. I mean, it is absolute madness. There is no way. People often say, "Oh, well, how are we going to pay for it? How can we pay? How can we afford it?" There is no way we could possibly afford not to pay for it, because the cost of the damage is so great, and the benefits that will come from the clean energy investment and from making our economy more inclusive and more just are so tremendous. And so, the spending pieces, the president can't do the spending piece all on their own. So Congress needs to be involved in the spending piece. Like I was saying, there are some ways that Biden can control some financial flows, but of course, Congress holds the purse strings, and the president does need to work with Congress. However, Biden can do that from a position of strength. It is no accident that most people, when they think about climate action, they think about Congress passing new legislation, and that is part of a deliberate PR campaign by polluters to convince people of that. Because whenever a climate solution is proposed, polluters always say, nah, that's not good. Let's do something else. We need something new. And Biden has so much he can do under the law, under the laws that are already on the books. He needs to get going. He can set the rules for the how much renewable energy needs to be part of our energy mix for transportation. He can set the rules that say we need to move to 100% zero emission vehicles within the next decade, really, really quickly. And as he does that, then Congress will be motivated to work on the spending piece and to do the investment pieces. But what Biden can't do is he can't wait and do nothing, because we're simply out of time.
Well, those 10 things for the climate that he can do in the first 10 days by executive order include all that money from defense and from subsidies towards building the green energy future. And there are the jobs for the people that have been put out of work because of the COVID pandemic, right? I mean, that's one way that those two things go together, right? And
yes, absolutely. So many jobs can be created through things like renewable energy construction. And then, and then things like zero emission passenger vehicles. I mean, they're so much better. Anyway, first of all, the vehicles are better and they save people money. And when people have that extra money, then they can spend it on other things. And that also helps benefit the economy, strengthen the economy, and strengthen the job market. So all of it goes together, and folks can look at the full 10-step list. It's at climatepresident.org, and it's also on page 277 of Jane's book. If you have it near you, can flip to page 277.
Thanks for that plug, Kassie. But I just, because it's so important and so great, I just want to point out that one of the 10 things is he can bring back the Clean Air Act, right?
I'm so glad you brought this up, Jane. I mean, this is one that is particularly near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
The Clean Air Act has protected the air we breathe for 40 years. It is so successful. And you know, the main pollutants that have been regulated with a national pollution cap under the act, like ozone, they have dropped dramatically at the same time that the economy has grown. And greenhouse gases over the same time period, they've been unregulated and greenhouse gas emissions have gone up. And we can use the proven successful programs in the Clean Air Act to reduce greenhouse emissions economy-wide. It is all set up and ready to go, and we need to demand that Biden use it for power generation, for cars and trucks and airplanes. We need to decarbonize the aviation industry or limit flights because it has been, pollution from that sector has been growing so quickly. And these Clean Air Act programs work.
Oh boy, do they ever. You know, for 20 years, as I said in the beginning, I lived in Georgia. And when I would come back to California for various reasons, I was just shocked at how my eyes would burn, my head would ache. And, you know, I would say to my friends, how do you tolerate this? You know, have you actually become so used to it that you don't even notice anymore? I mean, it was just terrible. And now that's gone. We don't have that problem anymore. Our eyes don't burn anymore. So I can testify to the fact that the Clean Air Act did work and how horrified I was when Trump repealed it, but we're going to get it back. So finally, let me ask you, Kassie, how can people sign up to get involved? What can we do?
So first, thank you to everybody who's with us for everything you're already doing, and please keep doing it. Please keep listening to Jane. And you know, I would say there's so much money that comes from oil and gas lobbyists, and that money is talking, and we need to talk louder. We need to keep building the movement. So please keep coming to Fire Drill Fridays. Please read up on the Climate President Action Plan at climatepresident.org and the Frontlines Climate Justice platform. Please sign up on those websites to get more info. Please share them with all your friends and invite your friends to join us too. Write a letter to the editor of your local paper talking about why you want Joe Biden to be a climate president and not wait for Congress. So I'd say most of all, keep using your voice.
Thanks so much, Kassie, for your expertise. And I think it's time now for some audience questions. Maddie, do you have any questions? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, we sure do. So from Jamie on Facebook, fantastic, of course, that Biden won, but the election is not over yet. There's still an important runoff election in Georgia. Can you talk about why it's so important to get a Senate majority?
It is so important. And I know it's frustrating because we worked so hard on that election and we just want to put that election behind us and move forward. But there's one more bit we have to do, which is get this runoff. Georgia is one of 2 states that has a runoff election. So if no Senate candidate gets over 50%, they run the 2 top candidates. So there's 2 seats at play in Georgia. And it is crucial that we win them, because if we win them, then the Democrats will have control of the Senate. Now, as Kassie laid out, the president can do a whole bunch of things without the Senate, and the president should do that, and we will make sure that the president does that. We don't need to wait for the Senate, but if we can get Democratic control of the Senate, we can do a whole bunch more things. The Senate used to actually do things. You know, recently I was talking to some young people who said to me, "Is it true that Congress used to do stuff?" I said, "Where'd you hear that?" And they said, they heard about it in college, that Congress used to do stuff. I said, yes, Congress used to do stuff, good things. And if we unlock the potential, then we can do that again. The Senate can govern. There has been this paralysis based on partisan polarization and abuse of the filibuster, that the Senate has just come to this grinding gridlock, which only serves business as usual. So we got the White House, we got the Congress. Now we need to win these 2 seats in Georgia to get a majority in the Senate, and that will unlock the possibility for Biden and the Senate to govern on gun control, on healthcare, on workers' rights, on racial justice, on, I mean, so many things. That really unlocks the potential. So if you're in Georgia, definitely vote. If you're turning 18, if you weren't 18 for the last election, but you're going to turn 18, by then you can register now to vote. If you're outside of Georgia, you can still participate. My daughter and I are writing postcards every evening to voters in Georgia. You can text, you can call, all the same things that you learned how to do so well to get Biden and Harris into that White House. We need to do just a little bit longer for this Senate race on January 5th. Then we can move forward.
Thanks, Annie.
So from Nina on Twitter, what are some of the cabinet choices that could make it harder for climate leaders to get elected? Who should not be in the cabinet, like Ernie Moniz? And who are some of the people who speak to climate voters that you do like Jay Inslee?
I can take that one. I mean, those are two of the people that work for that I've been looking at as examples. Again, we absolutely cannot have fossil fuel lobbyists, fossil fuel representatives in Biden's administration. Ernie Moniz in particular is someone who serves on the board of a fossil fuel utility, Southern Company. He's touted natural gas as a bridge fuel and loves to promote an all of the above energy strategy that is so 2009, right? It's so a decade ago. The climate crisis is so much worse. We cannot wait for middle of the road solutions. We need bold action. So we need people like Jay Inslee is one of them. Deb Haaland is another one. People who have been proven leaders on climate action, who have released and champion bold policies to confront the fossil fuel industry, to tackle fossil fuel racism, to advance the Green New Deal, and to invest in clean air, clean water, and good jobs for all of us. So those are the kind of people that we need in roles, from the Environmental Protection Agency to if Biden names a new White House climate czar, climate council, those leadership roles, and all the ones below that, all the undersecretary roles, all the ones that are going to be responsible for actually implementing the policies that we're going to need and that Biden, as Kassie has spoken to, can absolutely take on from day one.
Elizabeth Warren could be Secretary of Treasurer. Bernie could be Secretary of Labor, which he wants.
Absolutely, and we've seen all these rumors about the Biden transition team, about Democrats, running to moderates, right, running to compromise, and there's no time for that. The people, again, millions of people voted for progress, voted for accountability, and voted for a future that is going to be better, that can ensure that we can all thrive. And so some of these proven champions, proven leaders on the policies that we need to secure, good healthcare for all, good food and water and air and clean water, and safe housing, and a good education. These are the people we need in Biden's administration. And these are the people that will actually help him show that he can govern, and show that Democrats can govern and can make a better life for everyone.
Thanks, Charlie.
From Dario on Instagram, do you all think the climate movement is aligned on what should be prioritized right now?
I can take that one because, we had the tremendous pleasure and privilege of working with over 500 organizations on climatepresident.org, and hundreds also are on the Frontlines Climate Justice Plan. And so, of course, you never have universal agreement on anything, but I remember what it was like 12 years ago when we were transitioning from G.W. Bush to President Obama, and what things were like that. And I agree with Annie. I mean, we are in, it's a whole new world. And to have 500 organizations saying, President Biden, these are your top 10 priorities, I have to tell you, that is something. So I think we have a tremendous amount of alignment. I think we have a tremendous amount of power. We need to not forget that, and we need to keep building it and keep demanding what we really need, and the things are going to make a brighter, healthier, more just world for all of us.
And I would add that it's not just the climate movement that's aligned, right? We've seen broader alignment and broader synchronicity across all our social movements, especially in 2020, especially under the last administration, with the movement for Black Lives and the ways that climate activists, like so many of you, I'm sure, showed up in the streets and online in solidarity, with all the fights that we're facing. I think people are really coming together and again recognizing that all the crises that our communities face are interlinked or interlocking. We cannot address them separately. There's an understanding across millions of people in communities across the country that we have to be ready. But again, collaboration, working together on building a better future does not mean falling into line, does not mean unity. We need to keep at that pressure. We need to keep demanding the future that we want and that we know is in reach.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Kassie. Let's have a few more questions, Maddie, huh?
Perfect. From Ina on Twitter, some Democrats are already pushing the theory that progressive messaging around the movement for Black Lives and the Green New Deal led to the party's loss of congressional seats in last week's election. How do we change or challenge that narrative?
Annie, do you want to take that?
Well, I think there's a couple ways we change and challenge that. One is we look at the data, and the congressional candidates that supported Black Lives Matter won their seats.
Right.
Reality doesn't actually back that up. The other way that we challenge that is we support more progressive candidates. People who are watching this can run for office themselves. We support the candidates, get out there and back them up that have our values. The electorate is changing in this country. If you look at pictures of Congress now versus 20 years ago, Congress is changing. It is moving in that direction. And that's a challenge to status quo people, regardless of which party they're in. But we have no choice. The movement is unified. The climate movement is especially strong and powerful, and things are changing. So either get it with the program or get out of the way.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pointed out that the distributed organizing, the robust digital operation that Bernie Sanders had, that Obama had when he first ran, that AOC and other members of the squad and others have, it works. And the Democratic Party doesn't have it. And they've rejected attempts to help them build it. So we need to get a Democratic Party that will understand the power of a digital campaign and distributed organizing. I think that's one of the big reasons why they lost some of those Senate seats.
Well, that's what organizing looks like in the modern era. That is organizing, and lots of people, especially young people, but really everybody now, are spending time online. So why would you not go to where everybody is? So yeah, that's what organizing and base building looks like. So if they will not embrace that, they're just building their demise there.
One more question, Matt. Oh yeah, go ahead, Kassie.
Oh, I think that's also right. And just on a related point is that the political argument that we heard from the Obama administration for not doing more, because they acknowledged that more needed to be done. And the political argument was, we need to appease polluters and we need to move further to the right, because if we don't compromise, it's going to cause more backlash. And then we might get some really extreme right-wing person win the election. And they stuck to that strategy for 8 years, and we ended up with Trump anyway. And that's a failed strategy. It's actually been the strategy that's been articulated for 30 years, and it hasn't worked. We're out of time. We need to really implement the good laws we already have. We really need to make the bold change.
Yeah,
and you can, yeah. And if you continue to hear it from people within the Democratic Party, I think we need to ask ourselves, are they, I mean, they're vested in, Democrats take a lot of money from fossil fuel polluters too. And it's not that strategy has failed, and it's an excuse from people who don't actually want to do those bold things. And that's where we have to hold them accountable and keep pushing, as Jane and everybody has been saying so well.
Mm-hmm. One more question, Maddie?
Yeah, from Allie on Facebook. Can you talk more about what is in the Climate President and Demos Frontlines Executive Action Plans?
I would love to say a couple more words of that, and maybe I'll focus on what Biden has actually already promised, because as we've been talking about, there is a lot that's really good in the Biden-Harris plan. So one of those things is end new federal fossil fuel leasing. About a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions come from oil, gas, and coal that's held in trust for the public by the federal government. And it is madness for the federal government to keep selling off those fossil fuels for new development. And Biden has promised to end it as a day one action, end federal leasing, end federal permitting. We got to hold him to it. And he has promised that there would be no new fossil fuel infrastructure projects, because he has said really, really well, infrastructure projects that are going to be built have to show how they can reduce their emissions. No new fossil fuel project can do that. And so they're going to be off the table. He has promised that there will be an environmental justice screening tool. That's really, really important. We have to be looking at every government through the lens of environmental justice. And you can read a lot more about that in the Demos Frontlines Climate Justice Plan. Another wonderful thing in there is using the Clean Air Act to eliminate pollution hotspots. So as we all know, the pollution is not experienced equally. It's low-income communities of color that are hit the hardest, and Biden can get the EPA to work on that right away, not just to identify the problem, but to solve it. So those are just a few more.
I just want to remind everybody, though, that it's not enough just to have the government. I mean, it's great for the government to pass those kind of laws and regulations. Governor Gavin Newsom here in California did it. Are they implemented? No. So it's important that even with the regulations on the books, we have to stay vigilant and active and force those people to make it happen. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. I hope you're still riding high from the election results, and that they serve as a reminder that people power works. And when our movements really put their mind to something, we can make that happen. Now we really need to apply that same energy to making sure this administration takes the urgent action needed to address the climate emergency and the transition off fossil fuels. Many thanks to my wonderful, I just love the three of you so much, Charlie, Kassie, and Annie, for talking us through the current landscape and the first steps we need to take to keep the pressure on. So you must stay involved. Join us at Fire Drill Fridays. Every Friday, we will keep you posted on the breaking opportunities to ensure those who get elected deliver on what the climate needs and the people demand. Keep an eye on firedrillfridays.com for up-to-date information. I'll see you next time.